Jujutsu Kaisen 261 was one of the most insane reveals we've seen in the entire series. It's a Gojo vs Sukuna rematch, but not really in the way that anybody thought. Yuta Kotsu, now using Kenjaku's curse technique, is going to be fighting Sukuna inside of Gojo's body. But at the same time, Sukuna's not exactly in the best condition. Going into this fight, it seems to be more complicated than Gojo vs Sukuna was the first time, which wasn't really simple to begin with. With me, I have another JJK YouTuber that you guys might know. His name is Mir.
Hello.
Yeah, hello Mir. Say hello like a person.
Bro, I said hello. Yeah, what's up? It's Mir. And I just want to let you guys know that me and Jaded just had a 20-minute argument because he thinks that this fight is slightly leaning towards Yuta's favor, whereas I think that this fight isn't leaning in anybody's favor for a bunch of factors that we're going to get into.
Yeah, we'll make sure to go over all of them in today's video. Make sure you like and subscribe and comment some video ideas you want to see be done below, and go subscribe to Mir.
First of all, I think that this fight is ambiguous. We don't know who's going to win, and I actually don't think it's leaning in anybody's favor for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is we don't know exactly how good Yuta is inside of Gojo's body, and we also don't know exactly how nerfed Sukuna is right now. You know that although he has a Yuta level of curse energy, we see that he's beginning to heal towards the end of the chapter. And whenever we see Sukuna go all out, we see that he gets stronger, which makes sense. We see that when he's locked in against Maki, he lands a Black Flash. And then we see that when he sees Gojo again, Yuta inside of Gojo's body, he gets locked in once again. Whenever Sukuna is locked in, he completely outperforms every form of Sukuna we saw earlier when he was just fighting the cast normally. Another thing we don't know is how their domains are going to interact with each other, because now that Yuta has Gojo's memories, he knows of all the binding vows that can be made to change the conditions for a domain clash. I will say the one thing that Yuta definitely has a leg up in is the fact that he has all of his limbs, whereas Sukuna doesn't have any left hands whatsoever. So if they domain clash and then get into a physical fight, Yuta should have the leg up as long as he's flowing right in Gojo's body, because like I said earlier, we don't know exactly how proficient Yuta is about to be in Gojo's body since it is the first time he's been here. But if things go normally, which is a big if, then he would have the leg up when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. But another thing we also know is that there's a time limit for Yuta. He only has 5 minutes, and then we don't even know if that's including the travel time it took him to get here. Maybe he teleported here automatically so he has the full 5 minutes. But if he only has about 4 minutes left, this fight, this domain clash and them fighting inside of their domains might just take up the time that Yuta would need to defeat Sukuna. So Yuta is on a time limit whereas Sukuna is not. With those main things in mind and a couple more things that me and Jaded are going to talk about later, I just think it's too ambiguous to say that this fight is leaning in anybody's favor, but yeah, we'll talk about it.
So like Mir said, both of them definitely have their advantages and disadvantages going into the fight. I think Yuta having Gojo's memories is definitely something that's going to help Yuta all throughout this fight with Sukuna. Another aspect that Yuta is going to have, which not a lot of people are really talking about, is that Gojo's body should obviously have the muscle memory from when he was a sorcerer. We saw people like Yuji, for example. He grew in strength like crazy because Sukuna relates special grade experience all over his body by using his Jujutsu. But just like Mir said, there's definitely a lot that we really just don't really know, and we're gonna have to wait and find out. That's the big overhaul of what we think about the fight. But going by point, when it comes down to different moments and different aspects to what we're gonna see during the fight, we'll go into all those right now. Chapter 261 ends with Yuta using Infinite Void, clashing against Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine once again, just like we saw in Gojo vs Sukuna round 1. Now obviously the first thing to point out is that Malevolent Shrine isn't really in the best condition. Originally, Malevolent Shrine was basically completely unusable because Sukuna got his brain fried with Infinite Void. It was an entire part of his brain that was really completely unusable and he couldn't cast a domain expansion. But by using Gojo's hand sign, the hand sign that he uses for Infinite Void, Sukuna was able to once again re-expand Malevolent Shrine. Because of a multitude of things like landing Black Flashes and impromptu binding vows, Sukuna was able to bring back Malevolent Shrine to basically full output. The only problem with this Malevolent Shrine is that it can't really last longer than 99 seconds. Once 99 seconds is up, Malevolent Shrine is going back to being uncasted. Now the reason why this is such an important detail is because when we saw Gojo clash Infinite Void the first time with Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine, when Gojo made his domain in a way that could actually withstand being in Malevolent Shrine to where his barrier wasn't cracking on the outside, Gojo had no problem sitting inside Sukuna's domain for a full 3 minutes before he was actually able to fully take it down. Obviously Sukuna's current Malevolent Shrine only being able to stand 99 seconds compared to Gojo being able to keep up Infinite Void for about 3 minutes before taking down Malevolent Shrine, it doesn't doesn't look too good for Sukuna going into this fight. But on the other hand, that also kind of relies on the idea that Yuta's going to be as proficient or just as good as Gojo when it comes to using Infinite Void. Yuta using Kenjaku's curse technique and therefore having Gojo's memories is definitely going to be a plus when it comes to filling in that area, because if Yuta has all of Gojo's memories, he should be able to replicate exactly what Gojo does from his own kind of personal experience. When it comes to Gojo figuring out techniques, because he has the 6 size and he's just so efficient with cursed energy, most of the time when he can't really figure out how to perform a technique, it's because he literally doesn't even know where to start. Once Gojo has the steps and he's actually able to do the things to actually perform the technique, he really has no problem pulling them off. For example, when he actually figured out how to perform reverse curse technique, he was able to perform a red on his first try, and then he did the same thing with purple. Simple domain, for example, was one of those techniques that Gojo had no problem being able to do on his first try, because for a genius like him, it's super simple.
So, like Jaded said, Yuta should be able to just use the techniques, right? He should be able to use blue, purple, and red, and I agree that this is something that should come fairly easily since he does have the 6 size, and the 6 size do allow Gojo to have this fine curse energy control and an understanding of curse techniques. So I have no doubt that Yuta should be able to do all of the limitless techniques. The only thing that I'm not sure how Gege would take a spin on it is how Yuta will perform physically, because even though Gojo is super fast, maybe Yuta won't be used to moving as fast as Gojo can, and this is assuming Gojo is faster than Yuta, which I think he should be. Gege could either make it where Yuta has to get used to moving in a fast physical body like Gojo, or Gege might just ignore that completely and just have Yuta perform physically on par with Gojo. That is something where I don't know exactly where Gege would take that, but if Yuta can control Gojo's body physically well and his curse techniques well, then he should just be on Gojo's level. And if he truly is 100% of the strength that Gojo was, then I can see why Jaded is saying that this fight is leaning towards Yuta's favor. But the reason that I won't say outright that this fight is leaning towards Yuta's favor is simply because we don't know everything that's going on with Yuta's body. Like I said earlier, there is a time limit, so even if he is the same strength as Gojo, will he be able to kill Sukuna within 5 minutes? And then we don't even know what's going to happen after that 5 minutes is up. Will he just return to his body? Will he just die? We even see some theories that Gojo will wake up again and Yuta will just go away. With all of these things that we don't know, it is a bit too soon to say that this fight is just leaning in one sorcerer's favor over the other. And you also have to account for what I said about Sukuna trying, because even though we've seen Sukuna have these close moments where we saw Higuruma hit him with the Judgment Sword, Sukuna cut his own hand off and dodged that, and then we see that whenever Yuji tried to stab Sukuna in the back, it just bounced off Sukuna's back there as well. We've seen Sukuna in these high stress moments have internal dialogue, but the only time we've seen him truly go all out post Gojo fight was against Maki. So you can't look at what Sukuna's been doing recently and just try to say that that's the strength that Sukuna is at, because whenever he goes all out and tries, like we see against Maki, he's completely dialed in to where he can just land black flashes. So we're going to see that Sukuna in this fight with Yuta. We're not going to see the same Sukuna that was fighting Yuji and Todo, because Sukuna will be trying much harder here. He's much more excited. And remember back at the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen, when Mahito was telling Hanami that if he had fun while fighting, he would even grow in strength? That is sort of how it works with Sukuna. The more he's having fun, the more excited he is, the stronger we see Sukuna is.
Just to go along with what Mir said, even in Shinjuku alone, whenever Sukuna's interest really peaks, that's when he's the most focused on taking down his opponents. For example, when he fought Maki, he felt pressured that he had to prove the worth of his Jujutsu compared to insane physical skill like Maki Zenin. And that's the first time we've ever seen Sukuna in the entire series land the Black Flash. And if you know one thing about landing a Black Flash, you have to be in the zone for it. You have to be extremely focused and sharpened if you want to land the Black Flash. We saw when Yuji fought Hanami way back in Goodwill, if even for a second Yuji's mind drifted in thinking about Junpei and Megami, Yuji completely flopped when it came to landing a Black Flash. And since then, with Sukuna's growing interest, he's only been landing more Black Flashes all leading up to this moment and this fight with Yuta. When Yuta shows up on the battlefield, Sukuna's actually just shocked. He says he didn't think that Okotsu was capable of going this far. And that's when he just drops Yuji and immediately goes to fight Yuta. Sukuna was already landing Black Flashes and already had that crazy focus and excitement when it came to fighting other sorcerers, but even Yuji Itadori, as strong as he just became, Sukuna threw him aside in exchange for fighting Yuta. The initial problem that we already know with Infinite Void clashing against Malevolent Shrine is obviously that Malevolent Shrine with its range and just destroy Infinite Void's barrier from the outside. But the narrator asked that same question and explains that Gojo showed Yuta that very answer. Going into this fight, we're probably going to see another tiny Infinite Void engulfing Malevolent Shrine. Gojo's previous counter to Malevolent Shrine was decreasing his barrier size to about the size of a basketball. He used the experience that he had of being trapped inside an interior which was way smaller than the actual world, that being the prison realm. Using that experience, he was able to shrink the size of his domain and therefore increase its density, letting it survive longer against Malevolent Shrine slashes, being that the reinforcement is more concentrated across a smaller area. As far as now, we're probably going to see Yuta recreate that exact same thing.
So like Jaded said, traditionally, Malevolent Shrine should just beat out Unlimited Void every time, for the simple fact that the slashes hit Unlimited Void from the outside, thereby letting Sukuna win the domain clash. But like we said earlier, since Yuta has Gojo's memories and Sukuna also has changed the conditions of his domains in the past, we know that they're going to go into this fight using some domain clash that we haven't seen before. But there's one thing to note. In chapter 258, Sukuna was only able to keep his domain expansion up for 99 seconds. This was that sort of partial domain that he opened. We see that Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine here seems to be the full Malevolent Shrine. Let's just say for the moment that Sukuna cannot keep his domain up past 3 minutes. That is very important because we know that it takes Malevolent Shrine 3 minutes to crumble Unlimited Void. So Sukuna has to be able to keep this domain up for 3 minutes to have a chance at beating Yuta. We know that Sukuna can be stunned by Unlimited Void, so if Sukuna does get hit by Unlimited Void, he will just lose the fight. The only way he can stop himself from getting hit by the sure hit is by touching Yuta. So let's look at the main problems for both of them. The main problem for Sukuna is keeping his domain expansion up for 3 minutes. If Sukuna can do this, then he should be able to win the domain clash. But like I said earlier, we don't know exactly what the conditions are going to be, so it's sort of hard to make a claim on that. And the main problem for Yuta will just be making sure that he has a condition that will withstand Malevolent Shrine. Because at the end of the day, you have to protect the outside of your domain expansion from the slashes, assuming that Sukuna will go that route on Yuta. So if Yuta fails to make a protective barrier around the outside of Unlimited Void, or somehow counteracts Malevolent Shrine, then he will just lose the domain clash. And one other thing that we know about domain clashes is that if Sukuna is nerfed to the point where his domain expansion is nerfed as well, then Yuta does have a big edge going into this domain clash. But like I said earlier, we also don't know how proficient Yuta is inside of Gojo's body. If the 6 eyes allow him to perform Unlimited Void at the same level Gojo is able to do it, or even better, then he should theoretically win this domain clash. But you know, like I said, there's just too many ambiguous things. We don't know the conditions. We don't know the state of both domain expansions. And if nerfs affect either of them, there's truly just no way to know.
Just like Mir said, if Yuta Gojo or Gojo Yuta is going to be able to use Infinite Void at the same level that Gojo was using Infinite Void before against Malevolent Shrine, Sukuna's going to have to make some serious parameter changes if he plans on keeping this domain active and actually winning the clash. One thing Sukuna might be able to pull off is closing his domain's barrier. And before you say that that would only reduce his domain and put him at a greater disadvantage, there's actually a couple pros to this decision. First of all, going into the last domain, one of the reasons why the narrator said that Sukuna chose to keep an open barrier was because he had to, because of Maki Zenin. Because Maki doesn't have any cursed energy, a normal barrier isn't really capable of tracking her and landing any sure hit attacks. If Sukuna used a closed barrier on Maki Zenin, Maki wouldn't be able to be captured inside the domain, which leaves Sukuna potentially exposed to an attack from the outside, which would have completely broken down Malevolent Shrine. It seems that Maki's gone. Odo teleported Maki somewhere outside the 230 meter radius of Malevolent Shrine, and we really have no idea where she could be. Sukuna also choosing to use a closed barrier means possibly trapping Yuji and Todo inside of their domain clash. This could create a problem for Yuta Kotsu because, as we know, Infinite Void attacks everybody trapped inside. Sukuna's used this very aspect of Infinite Void before against Gojo, where to adapt Megami to Infinite Void sure hit, he purposely left Megami with Maharaga's wheel in his head to take the full front of the information that comes with landing the sure hit. So if Sukuna did decide to close his barrier's domain, therefore trapping Yuji, Todo, and Yuta inside, it could lead to one of two things. It could force Yuta to either turn off his sure hit entirely, or somehow force him to make contact with Yuji and Todo the entire time, because that's the only way to avoid Infinite Void sure hit. Now, one thing about Yuta Kotsu is that he's one of the only people in the series that we've seen to be able to concentrate his sure hit on just one person. Something like Infinite Void attacks everybody trapped inside, but Yuta using Angel's Curse technique, for example, he was able to concentrate it only to attack Sukuna. If Sukuna does choose to close close his domain's barrier for, let's say, in exchange in a longer duration for his domain, then Yuta might be able to counter it by selectively choosing who gets hit with his Infinite Void. But then again, as far as now, we just don't know. If Yuta's version of Infinite Void is going to be just as strong as Gojo's Infinite Void, then Sukuna's definitely going to have to make some serious changes if this is the same Malevolent Shrine that we saw back in chapter 258. But the real thing to consider is what's going to happen after this domain actually ends. There's a couple of factors that make this completely different than the Gojo vs Sukuna that we saw originally.
So a couple of things that would happen, say for example, they domain clash and it just ends. Say neither one of them wins the clash and now they just have to fight hand to hand. It's hard to tell who would have the upper hand. Yes, Sukuna has the world slash, but we know that he has to make his domain symbol in order for him to use the world slash. And we also know that Yuta would be on the lookout for this inside of Gojo's body. Assuming now that Yuta knows about this technique, maybe he will begin to teleport out of the way if he sees it coming. But that's a big if in itself. Also, when it comes to things like red, blue, and purple, Yuta should be able to hit Sukuna with a few reds, assuming that they are around the same level in speed. As Gojo was able to do this in their first fight, I don't see any reason why Yuta shouldn't be able to do the same thing. But like we said earlier, the main thing is getting rid of Sukuna in 4 minutes, well, really 5 minutes. How much time will the domain clash take up? Say for example, they domain clash for 2 minutes. Well, now Yuta only has 3 minutes left in Gojo's body to kill Sukuna. So he would have to somehow kill Sukuna in 3 minutes. That is an insane task to do, since we know that Sukuna has insane durability. His reverse curse technique is also insane. His recovery is insane as well. And Sukuna is extremely powerful. So it's not like he's just standing there while you get to beat on him for 3 minutes. He's going to be sending slashes back at you, world slashes back at you, punching you with domain amplification so he can get through your infinity. A bunch of things that Yuta will have to deal with. And to deal with all of these things and kill Sukuna in under 3 minutes, it's just such an insane task. If Yuta can pull this off, it would be amazing. But at the end of the day, those are the main things that they would have to worry about post-domain clash. How much time Yuta has left, how many attacks he can hit him with, and not only how many attacks, but how damaging are the attacks that Yuta will hit Sukuna with. These factors are the main big problems, and to ask for Yuta to do this in such a short time span of just 5 minutes is an insane task to ask from him.
Just to add on to what Mir said, we saw how calm and collected Gojo looked after he unalived Agito and landing a couple more black flashes, and Sukuna is also going to be carrying around that same energy, being that he's been landing even more black flashes than Gojo did when he fought Sukuna the first time. Now, one key difference that's going to be a pretty important part after the domain clash is actually over is going to be reverse curse technique. Sukuna's reverse curse technique has been slowed for a couple chapters now. If there's even still time left for a second domain expansion before the 5 minutes are up, Yuta might be in better favor than Sukuna. We know that you can reverse curse technique your way back to another domain expansion, and that's something that Yuta said before that he definitely wouldn't try. But then again, that's before Yuta was really willing to go to any lengths when it came to winning. That's before Yuta agreed to become the monster that everybody needed. Whereas before he might have said that he really didn't want to do something like this, he might be fully willing to risk his own brain, especially considering that when the 5 minutes are up, Yuta's pretty cooked anyways. If Sukuna with his slowed reverse curse technique goes up against Yuta, who might be able to constantly refresh his brain, there might be a second domain clash where Yuta's just standing there with Sukuna stunned inside of Unlimited Void, but that's just a big assumption. If Sukuna's trapped inside Infinite Void now, he's not going to have Maharaga or really anything to do about it. He can use domain amplification to possibly negate the sure hits, but that's assuming he's going to be able to pull it off in time. Another problem for Sukuna is that he currently doesn't have really all of his hands. Sukuna fought Gojo with 2 hands before, and he's fighting Yuta with 2 hands now, but the main problem here is that Sukuna doesn't have any opposite hands. He kinda has just 2 left hands. He doesn't have a left or a right. This is a problem for Sukuna creating hand signs to do things like the world cutting slash. We know Sukuna before could only really take down Satoru Gojo even though he didn't have another hand to pull off the world cutting slash because he made a binding vow, which basically said that he'll be able to perform this world cutting slash one time without any conditions, as long as every world cutting slash that we see later on carries some pretty hefty conditions that Sukuna's constantly gonna have to follow through with if he plans on using this technique. If we take a look back to chapter 235 where we thought Gojo actually won the fight with Sukuna, the nerfs that Sukuna were given were kinda similar to the nerfs that we're seeing now. Sukuna with his slowed healing, no Maharaga, and an inability to do a lick of damage without domain amplification since he really doesn't have any way to launch world cutting slash right now, those are the same nerfs that he had in 235 and the same nerfs that he might have outside the domain expansion when fighting against Yuta. Again, without world cutting slash, Infinity immunity is still kind of an issue. Having to rely on domain amplification really isn't the best thing for Sukuna. Maharaga's been gone for a pretty long time and Sukuna hasn't even used the 10 shadows since. If it's not going to be with his domain expansion, Sukuna really doesn't have a way to really hurt Yuta without relying on domain amplification, which isn't already ideal. The bottom line for this video would probably be that we don't really know about what's going to happen. We know that there's different factors going into the fight, but there isn't really a real conclusion that we're going to be able to draw until we actually see the next chapter. You can decide to pick any of the factors that we named in this video and lean on any one of them for casting your bets, but at the end of the day, we're going to just have to wait and see.
And I still hold the same opinion, after we've talked about everything. Although I wouldn't blame you for thinking this is leaning in either one's favor, I still think because of everything we talked about, it's just basically too soon to say that it's leaning in one person's favor or the other's.
Make sure you guys go subscribe to Mir's channel. He makes pretty good GJK videos, pretty good. And
pretty good S-tier videos.
Yeah, Mir makes S-tier JJK videos. Y'all gotta go check him out, bro. But yeah, thank you guys for watching.